Yeah, that sweater was just for the bit. It's hot as balls in Arkansas. I'm not wearing that. Though I will admit, it's a great sweater. It's made by Fright Rags. Fright Rags, please sponsor me. Oh my god, I love your stuff. Holy crap. Changed the setup to, reflect tonight's movie, which is, of course, It Chapter 2.
Hello.
Quick recap for anyone who didn't catch it and the wave of pop culture hysteria that it caused in 2017. It Chapter 2 is the sequel to 2017's It, based on Stephen King's novel of the same name. I wrote this down to make sure it sounds as crisp as possible. 27 years after the events of the last film, the Losers Club reunites in Derry, Maine to take down the evil, shape-shifting creature known as Pennywise once and for all.
Sounded good, right?
Just like my Ready or Not review, I'm going to start everything spoiler-free, and then we'll work into a spoiler section, and then final thoughts. So, first things first, all the actors do really awesome. James McAvoy is, I was going to say great in everything. He's in some questionable movies, but even in those, he's pretty good. Class. Jessica Chastain, I think, probably was the best choice for Beverly. I heard, a bunch of different fan casting things when they were casting for It Chapter 2, and I think Jessica Chastain was definitely the best idea. Standouts, though, by far, Bill Hader as Richie, and James Ransone, I believe is how you say his last name. I'm sorry if I was wrong. Adult Eddie. Those two have amazing chemistry, just like Finn Wolfhard and Jack Dylan Glazer in It Chapter 1. It wasn't hard at all to believe that these were just, the grown-up versions of the kids we saw in the first movie. They're hilarious. They're by far the acting highlights of the movie. Really quickly touching on a scene that I don't think saying this is a spoiler because it's in all of the trailers. The bleachers scene where he picks up the Firefly. Amazing. Probably the best individual Pennywise scene we have other than him meeting Georgie. He's gruesome. He's manipulative. It's a really great scene. Maybe the highlight of the whole movie when it comes to just really getting the idea that is Pennywise. Just like in It 2017, Derry, just the environment, the town. Even though it's a horror movie, it puts you on edge. It's a real cozy place. I really enjoy just being there for the length of a film. And so it was nice to be back. Especially because, they're flipping present day flashback and stuff like that, and so it's real nice to see this town in two different time periods. I enjoy that. The movie is really funny, just like It Chapter 1 or It 2017, or I don't really know how we're gonna differentiate if we're gonna start calling that It Chapter 1. I don't know. I've already started doing that. If that becomes a thing, it was my idea, probably. I'm sure someone else already said it. The humor is really on point with this one. It's really funny. Bill Hader, unsurprisingly, is hilarious. I don't think I've ever seen him in something that he isn't just, slap your knee. I don't know what I was going to say there. That he isn't really funny. And of course, James Ransone, like I said, as Eddie is really particularly funny. But everybody gets a shot at, cracking some jokes and just kind of really selling this camaraderie, this Losers Club, I found a lot of people complaining about the length of the movie. It's 2 hours and 47 minutes, so it's going to take a big chunk of time. It is very long, but I didn't have any issues with the length. I didn't particularly feel the length. I was invested enough in the characters. I was digging the horror. I was digging the humor. So I was just happy that the movie kept going. I didn't really notice it. But I can totally see where that would be a turnoff for a lot of people. You got to realize that, my favorite movie last year was Suspiria. So that was another movie that a lot of people complained about the length, and I didn't have any issues with it. So I might not be the average barometer for that sort of thing, but personally, I didn't have any issues with the length. I found that it felt, perfectly normal. I enjoyed every minute of it. I had a good time. Just like the Ready or Not review, there will be a time code at the bottom of the screen. It tells you when the spoilers are over, if you just want the final thoughts. For anyone who's already seen the movie or you don't care about spoilers, let's get into that. I've also heard a lot of complaints about the effects, and I found them kind of 50-50. There were some that were really good. In particular, I've written down the leper, who reappears from the first movie. Those were really good effects in the first movie. It's still really good effects in this one. And then there's a scene in a flashback for Ben where he's confronted by Beverly, and then we find out that it's a projection from Pennywise. Her head catches fire and she starts chasing him, and that's a really good effect. It's clearly CGI, but it looks really good, and so it kind of goes to prove that not all CGI is bad CGI. But there are some that are pretty bad. The death of Adrian Mellon. The scene is really intense. It's a good scene. Much like with Georgie's death. Just when Pennywise opens his mouth real wide. That is a real hokey looking effect. I'm willing to not be too bothered by it. I'm invested in what's going on in the scene. It only takes a second, so it doesn't bother me too much. But I'll also admit it's not a great effect. And then I wasn't surprised that they did this. I was kind of surprised how not great it looked. There are a bunch of flashbacks throughout to elaborate on the story, and also probably to capitalize on the fact that everybody loved the kids from the first movie. But it's been 2 years, and so those kids have grown up. Particularly, I know Finn Wolfhard looks way older than he did 2 years ago. So they had to de-age the kids in some of the scenes. It's that same kind of Marvel, Disney de-aging technology. And it doesn't look great. There's one scene in particular, the first time that they go down underground into their kind of clubhouse area, and it does a flashback. That scene looks pretty bad. I don't know. I thought for a minute when I was watching it, it was an issue with the projector, because it also felt like the lips were out of sync with what was happening. And so I thought, something might have just gotten out of sync and it made everything feel out of whack. But thinking on it, I just think the de-aging effects were particularly bad and made everything feel particularly bad for that segment. Mike gets a whole lot more to do in this movie than he did in the first one, which is no surprise. He's a big part of the second half, however you want to say it. He's a big part of the adult half of the book. He's the one who makes the call. He stayed in Derry the 27 years. He remembers everything. And so him being so integral and having so much development and being so good in It Chapter 2 made me particularly frustrated in retrospect about It 2017, It Chapter 1, whatever. In that, specifically, they gave Ben Mike's his quirk, his love of history and knowing the town's history and things like that, because that's kind of what makes it believable that he would stay there for 27 years, that he would, take over the library and care about all this. That's a minor nitpick thing. That's like, I don't know if that would bother me as much if I hadn't read the book. And so I'm willing to not be too bothered by it, knowing that might be some, rose tinted glasses about the book sort of thing. But it's worth mentioning, I'm just going to go through my notes and tell you guys what I thought. There's a really fun Stephen King cameo at one point. They all go, they split up, they go about the town to reinvigorate, rejuvenate, however you want to say, their memories, reignite. That's the word I was looking for. January embers, my heart burns there too. To reignite their memories, to be able to fight. And Bill happens to notice his old bike, Silver, in a pawn shop window. And so he goes into the pawn shop, and the pawn shop is owned by Stephen King. And it was real fun. Stephen King isn't a great actor, as anyone who's seen Maximum Overdrive or Creepshow will tell you.
Honey, come on over here, sugar buns. This machine just called me an asshole.
But it's real fun, It's a nice little nod. He isn't he doesn't do a bad job. He's believable as this, pawn shop owner in this little Maine town. And so it was a fun nod for people who knew that was Stephen King. There's also a good joke in the fact that Bill becomes a writer. He's the Stephen King stereotype surrogate. And everyone's joking throughout the movie that his endings suck. A criticism frequently brought upon Stephen King. He has really grand, interesting ideas, and then he gets to the end of the book and it kind of flops and falters. And so they level that same criticism at Bill throughout the movie. And when Bill is buying Silver from Stephen King at the pawn shop, he sees that King has one of his books, offers to sign it, and King says, "Nah, the ending sucked." And I thought that was really funny, that he was willing to poke fun at himself and to acknowledge that he frequently gets that criticism and that it might be true. I didn't say that. I love you, Steven. Audra and Tom from the books, Bill and Beverly's adult partners, exist in this movie. Audra is there for Bill's introduction. She's working on the new film adaptation of one of his books. And Tom is there for Bev's introduction, where he gets a little bit of his domestic abuse on. But beyond that, they aren't important. They don't come back to the movie. There's no resolving those relationships. And so it makes you wonder if it was worth having them in there at all. It would definitely be weird to not have Tom, just because it reinforces that, Bev's abuse in her younger life has kind of reoccurred throughout her life, and she's ended up with an abusive person. And so that makes sense that you would at least acknowledge that. But with Audra, she just exists for maybe 2 minutes. I don't think they even say her name. So it's just one of those things where it's like, once again, I've read the book, so I have some expectations about the characters. Audra and Tom exist. Maybe that's for the better. Maybe it's not. That one I'll leave up to you guys. Let's talk about the Reddit-sized elephant in the room. Richie is canon queer now. So I'll let you know I'm a heterosexual white male. I'm coming at it from that point of view. I'd really like to hear someone in the queer community's point of view on this, because it could end up being a really positive thing, and so I'm hoping that's what it is. To kind of elaborate, in the book, Eddie, of course, raises this kind of queer conversation in that he's got this doting mother, and then when he's an adult, he kind of marries his mother. He's got these women that treat him so frail and fragile, and they don't let him be himself. And even in the miniseries and in It Chapter 1, he's very effeminate. And so there's always been this discussion on is Eddie queer? And they slightly play on that in this movie. But they very, very explicitly confirm that Richie is. There's a moment where Pennywise says that he knows Richie's deep, dark, dirty little secret. And I was interested to see where they went with that. And, all throughout the movie, it's very clear that Eddie and Richie are close, that there's a good bond there. They've got the best back and forth. And anytime, Eddie gets hurt or Richie gets hurt, they're both very, very caring for the other. And so upon Eddie's death at the end of the movie, Richie is just distraught. He doesn't even really believe it. Eddie's very clearly dead, and Richie keeps telling the Losers Club, we need to take him, we need to get him help, we need to help him. And he's crying, and at the very end, they're reading this letter that Stan had written, and it talks about accepting yourself and loving yourself for who you are. And it cuts to Richie at the kissing bridge, recarving in his and Eddie's initials, very clearly saying that Richie was in love with Eddie. And it was really powerful, especially thinking back on kind of Richie's character arc of being this person who kind of, cracks jokes in the books and in the miniseries. In the book and the miniseries, he does impressions and voices because it's easier to be someone else, to be brave when you're someone else. It's easier to do that than to be yourself. That's especially true when you're a queer person. And so I thought that was really... I liked that. I thought that was a really, really cool way to play that character. You can tell the respect that Bill Hader and Andy Muschietti have for this character, and that they're not parading it around in all the press stuff. They're not touting, how progressive and strong they are for having thought to do this. It's just another plot, it's another love story. Once again, I'm a white heterosexual male. I can only speak on this to a certain degree, but I very much enjoyed that. I thought that was a welcome addition. Going back to talk about Stan's letter, it's not directly from the book, but it is kind of taken from the miniseries. The idea that Stan killed himself because he was scared. They take that and they have him confirm it in a letter at the end of this movie that kind of reiterates the themes of the movie about, accepting the fact that we're losers and we should be proud of that, and you should be proud of who you are, find someone who loves you, things like that. And I thought it was done fine. I thought Stan's actual death was a little underwhelming, just the scene itself. But I thought the scene with his letter, the contents of the letter were fine and worked really well to hammer home the end of the film. I think when the inevitable supercut of this movie, however they want to do it, whether it's a 3-hour cut of both films together or a crazy 6-hour cut, whenever either WB or, the fans cut together these two movies, I think it's going to be really awesome. I think a lot of the particularly poignant parts of It Chapter 2 will hit a lot stronger if you have just experienced the kids' side of the story. So, with that being said, final thoughts. Before you go see It Chapter 2, rewatch It 2017. Like I said, I think the emotions in this movie will hit a lot harder if you've watched It 2017 recently. So rewatch It 2017. Make sure you got a big chunk of time in your day. It's nearly 3 hours. And go see It Chapter 2. I think it's worth it. I think it was a good way to end this series. I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5. Yeah, it was good. I enjoyed it. 3.5 out of 5. Cheers to you guys. Cheers to Stephen King and the cast and Andy. This was a really good ride.
For 27 years, I dreamt of you. I craved you. I've missed you.
We need to finish it. For good.
I've seen all of us die. It consumes us from the inside until we don't have a choice anymore.
You lied.